Imagine this. A single, seemingly innocuous network packet could bring down an entire corporate network, steal sensitive data, or even grind critical infrastructure to a halt. It's not a scene from some Hollywood blockbuster. It's the daily reality in the world of cybersecurity. How did you, as a future information systems professional, not only guard against these invisible threats, but also use this knowledge to, well, catapult your career?
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're plunging right into the core of network and system security. We're drawing insights directly from your assigned chapter of the CompTIA Security Plus Guide to Network Security Fundamentals. That's the 8th edition by Mark Ciampa. And we're also looking at a critical analysis of the thriving Dallas-Fort Worth job market. Our mission here is to really extract the most important nuggets of knowledge, not just for your academic success in BCIS 4045, but to equip you with the practical takeaways that ethical hackers and network defense specialists use, well, every single day.
Yeah, exactly. And this deep dive is custom tailored for you, a student in BCIS 4345, Network and System Security at Tarleton State University's Dr. Sam Pack College of Business. This course isn't just about theory, right? It's about understanding security as a continuous process, involving analysis, implementation, evaluation, and maintenance. We'll be exploring computer-related risks, diving into case analysis, looking at future trends, really equipping you with the approaches, techniques, and best practices for securing modern electronic data systems. Everything from information integrity to physical security, risk analysis, and encryption. Think of this as your shortcut, maybe, to becoming a well-informed, proactive force in the IT world. Okay, before we plunge any deeper, if you find this deep dive valuable, please take just a moment to like, subscribe, and share. It really helps us bring more insider tips and knowledge directly to you. Tips that could genuinely protect your future career. And hey, for additional resources and a comprehensive guide to today's topic, make sure to check out the description below.
Right. So to really grasp network security, we need a foundational understanding of how networks communicate. You're familiar with the OSI model, of course. It's our 7-layer roadmap, from the physical layer, where bits and bytes literally travel over tables, all the way up to the application layer, where your web browser and email clients live. This structured approach, it really helps us pinpoint where vulnerabilities might exist in the complex tapestry of modern networks.
I appreciate that setup. We often hear about attacks on web applications or like encrypted data, which are way higher up the stack, right? Layer 6 or 7 maybe. But what about the absolute foundation, the bedrock of network communication? The source material makes it pretty clear. While common security solutions like routers, firewalls, and intrusion prevention systems, IPSs, they protect Layer 3 through Layer 7. Layer 2 often gets, well, critically overlooked. So why does this lower layer, the data link layer, become such fertile ground for attackers? And what's the profound so what for us as future security pros?
That's a really crucial question, because the core insight here is, well, overlooking Layer 2, the data link layer, it's kind of like leaving the back door wide open after locking all the front doors. It's where devices like switches operate, directly handling Ethernet frames and essentially governing how devices communicate within the same local network segment. If an attacker can compromise Layer 2, they can potentially bypass many of the higher layer defenses you've meticulously put in place. The so what is that a Layer 2 breach often gives an attacker a foothold inside your trusted network. It lets them move laterally, escalate privileges, often before higher layer security even knows they're there. This undermines the very concept of securing modern electronic data systems from the inside out. It really does.
That's a vivid picture. It really is like an intruder getting past the front gate of a secure facility and just moving freely inside before anyone even notices. That's not just a minor issue, it's fundamental, a fundamental breach. So what specific kinds of Layer 2 attacks should we be particularly concerned about? And how do they directly impact the computer-related risks we're studying in this course?
Indeed. And these attacks, they exploit the inherent trust models of local networks. It's quite clever, actually. The CompTIA Security Plus Guide highlights several crucial Layer 2 attacks that, frankly, every network administrator must understand. We'll be digging into M address table flooding, DHCP attacks, CDP reconnaissance, telnet attacks, and VLAN attacks. Each of these can be, devastating, impacting network availability, confidentiality, and integrity right from the inside out by targeting the very mechanisms of local communication.
Okay, let's dive into some specifics then, starting with MASCII address table flooding, sometimes called M table overflow. Could you maybe paint a picture of how this attack works, maybe use an analogy, and then walk us through the technical details? What does a network administrator actually experience when this happens?
Absolutely. So imagine your network switch as a A very diligent librarian with a super organized card catalog. That's its content addressable memory, or CAM table. This table stores MS addresses and the physical ports they're connected to, enabling really efficient traffic forwarding. It's how the switch knows exactly which door, to send a specific piece of mail through. Makes your network fast and private. The attack, it exploits this very efficiency. An attacker connected to just a single switch port floods that interface with a massive number of Ethernet frames. But here's the trick. Each frame has a different fake source MA address. The switch, being helpful, tries to learn all these new addresses and the ports they're on, and it just quickly consumes its limited CAM table memory.
So if that card catalog gets completely overwhelmed with fake entries, what's the immediate, the most dangerous outcome for typical network users? What can an attacker suddenly achieve that they couldn't do before?
That's where the fail-open consequence comes in, and it's truly dangerous. Once the CAM table is full, the switch just can't intelligently forward traffic based on mashy addresses anymore. It doesn't know where anything goes. Instead, it enters this fail-open mode, effectively turning into an old-school, unintelligent hub. Remember those? This means it starts broadcasting all incoming frames out of all its ports, just blasting everything everywhere. The profound impact is...
Well, the intruder, now connected to this broadcasting hub, can easily use a packet analyzer like Wireshark to capture sensitive data flowing between other computers on the network. Data that would normally be private, only visible to the intended recipient. This is a direct assault on the information integrity that BCIS 4345 emphasizes. It transforms a secure local network into basically an open book for the attacker. It's a fundamental breach, allowing just unfettered access to communications because the network's internal traffic is suddenly exposed to everyone.
Wow, that's a powerful transformation. From an intelligent device to just an open broadcast system. For clarity, could you quickly remind us what a MAT address actually is? And perhaps why this CAM table, despite its efficiency, has this, fixed size vulnerability?
Certainly. MAC address, it's a 48-bit hexadecimal address. It's a unique layer 2 address, often burned right into the network interface card, the NIC. The first 24 bits are assigned by the AE to the manufacturer, like Cisco or Intel. And the second 24 bits are assigned by the manufacturer to that specific interface. Think of it like a device's unique physical serial number on the network. The CAM table then stores this MAT address, the port it's learned on, and any associated VLAN information, the fixed size. That's really due to hardware limitations. Switches have a finite amount of specialized fast memory for this lookup table, and manufacturers design them for typical network loads, not for malicious flooding with thousands of fake addresses per second.
Right, okay. To really visualize this, let's imagine our simple network. PCA, PCB, PCC, and PCD all connected to switch S1. When PCA pings PCB, the switch learns PCA's MEs is on port file 1 and PCB's MAC is on file 2. A show MAC address table command would show these entries, nice and neat, but then the attacker comes along. What kind of tools do they use to launch this kind of rapid-fire attack? It sounds like it needs speed.
Oh, definitely. Attackers leverage tools like MACOF, which is part of the popular DSNF suite. MACOF is notoriously efficient at this. It's specifically designed to send random source MSC and IP addresses. It just floods a switch with up to 8,000 bogus frames per second. It's incredibly fast. This rapid overwhelming of the switch's memory is, extremely effective, capable of overflowing a typical CAM table in just a matter of seconds. It's a prime example of a tool designed for offensive purposes, but critically understanding it is vital for defense. You have to know what you're up against.
Yeah, and for someone learning ethical hacking, understanding the macro site and interface syntax, even if you're not using it maliciously, is crucial for assessing vulnerabilities, isn't it? It's about knowing the enemy's playbook to build stronger defenses.
Absolutely. So given this vulnerability, what's our primary defense? What's the key best practice to prevent a CAM table overflow from happening in the first place?
The primary solution, and it's a highly effective one, is port security. This is a feature available on Cisco Catalyst switches, and similar features exist on other vendors' gear. Port security provides robust defense right at the port level. It allows an administrator to configure a switch port in several useful ways. You can, for instance, statically specify MA addresses for a port, meaning only a specific device, say MAA belonging to a known server, can connect to port 1. Or, more commonly, you can permit the dynamic learning of a limited number of MA addresses, maybe just 1 or maybe 5, depending on the port's purpose. What's crucial here is that if the maximum number of allowed MA addresses is reached, or if an unknown AM attempts to connect, the switch generates a security violation. This violation can trigger different actions based on configuration. Shut down the port immediately, log an alert for the security team, or simply restrict further traffic from unknown MAs.
That makes sense. That's a perfect example of implementing and configuring security measures, a key skill for you, the listener. By controlling what devices can connect to which ports, you prevent the switch from being overwhelmed, and you ensure traffic doesn't just turn into a free-for-all. What this really reveals, I think, is that defense at Layer 2 isn't always about complex firewalls miles away, but about meticulous control and defining trust boundaries at the most granular level of the port itself.
Precisely. It's about hardening the edge. Okay, let's move on to another critical Layer 2 vulnerability, DHCP attacks. To set the stage, could you quickly remind us of the standard DORA process for DHCP? And then, how does an attacker exploit that for something like DHCP spoofing? Certainly. The DORA process is fundamental to how a client gets an IP address automatically. A client sends a discover message broadcast onto the network saying, hey, any DHCP servers out there, any available server replies with an offer message, here's an IP address you can use. The client then requests one of the offered IPs. Okay, I'll take that one. And finally, a server acknowledges with the final assignment, okay, that IP is yours for this lease time. DOR. In DHCP spoofing, an attacker connects a rogue DHCP server to the network, just plugs it into an available port. Now, when a client broadcasts that DHCP discover message, both the legitimate server and the rogue server reply with offers.
Oh, okay. And what's the typical outcome then? What's the dangerous secret that an attacker gains by tricking a client into accepting their rogue offer? What's the real impact on messaging or maybe database integrity in a practical sense?
The dangerous secret, the real kicker, is that the client often accepts the rogue offer first, simply because the rogue server might be closer on the network or just respond faster. And this gives the client a malicious IP address, sure, but more importantly, a malicious default gateway and a malicious DNS server address. Suddenly, all the client's traffic, destined for the internet or other networks, gets routed through the attacker's machine first. This creates a classic man-in-the-middle attack. It's completely undetected by the client, who thinks everything is normal. The intruder intercepts and can potentially even alter all the data flow. The profound impact on messaging and database integrity. Sensitive data passwords entered on websites, financial transactions, proprietary information sent over the network, it's all exposed to the attacker. It's a silent redirection, giving the attacker immense control over the victim's network communication. Really dangerous.
That's incredibly insidious. The client thinks it's connecting legitimately, but it's actually being rerouted through the attacker.
Wow. What about the other major DHCP attack you mentioned, starvation? How does that impact a network, and what aspect of security does it primarily target?
Right, DHCP starvation is quite different. It's a denial-of-service attack aimed squarely at the legitimate DHCP server itself. Here, an attacker floods the legitimate DHCP server with DHCP discover messages, but the key difference is that each message uses a spoofed, fake MA address. This isn't about intercepting traffic, it's about overwhelming the server and completely exhausting its pool of available IP addresses.
Okay, I can picture that. It's like someone calling a restaurant's reservation line, thousands of times with fake names, right? Quickly filling up all the available slots. The legitimate DHCP server runs out of its entire pool of available IP addresses, denying new, genuine clients the ability to even connect to the network. The key insight here, I think, is how seemingly innocuous network traffic, just DHCP requests, when manipulated, can directly cripple business operations. It forces us to see network availability as a critical business function, not just technical jargon. Because if new employees can't get an IP, they can't work. That's a major business disruption.
Exactly right. Availability is key. So to mitigate these DHCP attacks, both spoofing and starvation Cisco Catalyst switches offer another powerful feature called DHCP snooping. Its core principle is pretty simple. It determines which switch ports are allowed to send DHCP server messages, like offers and acknowledgements. It differentiates between trusted ports. These are ports where legitimate DHCP servers or uplinks to them reside. Trusted ports allow all DHCP messages through. And then there are untrusted ports, which are basically all other ports, like those connected to end-user devices. These ports can only source DHCP client messages, like discover and request.
Ah, okay. So if a rogue device, say, tries to act like a DHCP server on one of those untrusted ports, what happens then? What's the fundamental principle DHCP snooping reinforces about network trust, and why is that so critical for, really, any modern network design?
Well, the magic happens right there. If a rogue device on an untrusted port tries to send a DHCP offer packet, something only a legitimate DHCP server on a trusted port should do, DHCP snooping sees that. And depending on the configuration, that port is typically immediately shut down. Error, disabled state, end of attack from that port. The fundamental principle DHCP snooping reinforces is zero trust at the access layer for critical network services like DHCP. You assume a port is untrusted until you explicitly designate it otherwise. It actively prevents both rogue servers, spoofing, and can help mitigate starvation attacks by rate-limiting requests on untrusted ports. It enforces trust at the port level. This shifts the security posture from reactive, oh no, there's a rogue server, to proactive, which is a critical element for implementing and configuring security measures in any secure network.
Right, proactive is the name of the game. Okay, transitioning from these specific Layer 2 attacks, let's talk about something equally vital for that continuous process of evaluation and maintenance and risk analysis. Security monitoring. Expert, once we know these attacks are possible, how do we actually see them happening? Or see the signs? That brings us to the critical role of monitoring.
You've absolutely hit on a crucial point. You really can't protect what you can't see. Monitoring is, essentially, our eyes and ears on the network. It's how we move beyond just reactive fixes after something bad happens to proactive defense. It aligns perfectly with that learning outcome to monitor and respond to incidents. Without robust monitoring, even the most sophisticated attacks can go unnoticed for days, weeks, even months, leading to far greater damage. And frankly, any risk analysis you do is incomplete if you don't have visibility.
Totally agree. And one of the key tools for gaining that visibility, especially on switch networks, is the Switched Port Analyzer, or SPAN, and its remote cousin, RSPAN. Can you explain how these work and what kind of strategic advantage they give a defender trying to watch the network?
SPAN and RSPAN are incredibly powerful, yet conceptually simple. They allow network traffic from specific source ports or even entire VLANs to be copied or mirrored. This copied traffic is then sent to a different destination port on the switch for SPAN or potentially another switch for RSPAN. This destination port is typically where you connect a network analyzer tool, like Wireshark, running on a dedicated machine, or perhaps an intrusion detection system, IDS sensor, or an intrusion prevention system, IPS. The strategic advantage is huge. It provides a completely non-intrusive way to observe network traffic in real time. It lets security professionals detect anomalies, analyze potential attack patterns, troubleshoot performance issues, all without impacting the actual flow of production network traffic. You're just getting a copy.
That's a fantastic capability. It's like having a security camera pointed at a busy hallway, as we said before. SPAN lets you mirror that view to a separate security desk where you can analyze everything happening without actually interrupting the people walking down the hall. It's absolutely crucial for understanding how packets flow in the real world and for conducting assessments. It gives you the unfiltered truth of network communications. What's the practical difference between SPAN and RSPAN, maybe in a larger enterprise setting?
Yeah, the distinction is mainly about scale and deployment flexibility. SPAN, or local SPAN, copies traffic to a destination port on the very same switch as the source ports. Simple, effective for monitoring traffic within a single switch. RSPAN, or remote SPAN, however, allows you to copy traffic to a destination port on a different switch somewhere else in the network. This usually requires configuring a dedicated RSPAN VLAN to carry that mirrored traffic across the network backbone between the switches. This allows for centralized monitoring. You could have all your monitoring tools in one location, receiving mirrored traffic from various switches across a large data center or campus network, much more scalable. Now, to really speak the language of monitoring, maybe in a security operations center, a CCC, we need a few key terms. Ingress traffic is traffic that enters the switch on a port. Egress traffic is traffic that leaves the switch from a port. The source SPAN port is the port, or maybe the VLAN that you're actually monitoring. This can be a layer 2 or layer 3 port. The destination SPAN port is where your analyzer or ID SIPs connects to receive the copied traffic. This port usually doesn't participate in normal network traffic, and a SPAN session is simply the configuration that associates the source ports or VLANs with the destination port. These are the building blocks for setting up effective network visibility.
Right. These aren't just definitions to memorize. They're the vocabulary you'll actually use when you're setting up a network to observe potential threats or, manage operations in a SOC. It's all about understanding what's going where and how to watch it. What about the tools we use for reconnaissance? Not just passively monitoring, but actively probing a network.
Good question. That leads us naturally to another indispensable tool, network scanning. Scanning is a method used to actively gather information up devices on a network, primarily to discover things like active hosts, open ports, and the services running on those ports. It helps answer fundamental questions. Which hosts are actually up and responding? What services are they offering, like web servers, mail servers, etc.? No, it's important to distinguish it from vulnerability scanning, which specifically tests for known weaknesses. Scanning is often the first step before you do a vulnerability scan. You need to know what's there before you can test it for flaws.
Gotcha. So before you can secure a system, you absolutely need to know what you're securing. Scanning answers those basics: which hosts are up, what services are running, maybe even what operating systems. Expert, how does actively performing network scanning contribute to a robust risk analysis and implementation strategy, specifically from a defender's perspective? Why scan your own network?
That's the key question. Scanning is essential for defense because it allows you to see your own network through an attacker's eyes proactively. It's critical for network security assessments, for evaluating and auditing your security policies. Are the firewall rules actually blocking what they should be? It's used for firewall penetration testing, again, checking policy effectiveness. It helps in IDS proof and evaluation. Can your IDS actually detect these scams? It's great for identifying unexpected new servers that might have been deployed without proper security oversight, shadow IT. And most importantly, for network and security administrators, it's about identifying open ports proactively so you can close unnecessary ones before an attacker finds them. The key insight here is that proactive discovery of your own vulnerabilities is the absolute first line of defense, not just waiting for an attack and then reacting. You're closing doors before attackers even try the handles.
This is exactly where ethical hacking meets network defense. You're using the same techniques an attacker would, but for good, for defense. Finding those open ports before a malicious actor does is a core responsibility for network and security admins, and it's how you manage operations and prepare to monitor for incidents. So when it comes to this kind of reconnaissance scanning, what's the go-to tool, the industry standard?
When you talk about network scanning, Nmap or Network Mapper is undoubtedly the industry standard. There's really no debate there. It's a very well-known, free, open-source security scanner. It has a long history of development, first released way back in FRAC 51 in 1997 by Fyodor. Its continuous improvements, massive feature set, scripting engine, and broad community support make it an indispensable tool for basically any security professional. If you're going into cybersecurity, you will encounter and likely use Nmap extensively.
Okay, so what's the X-ray vision of Nmap then? What are its primary features that make it so powerful for securing systems and ensuring integrity by giving you that inside look?
Nmap boasts a really impressive range of powerful features. It excels at host discovery, just identifying which hosts on a network are live and responding. For example, using techniques like ping sweeps. It performs thorough port scanning, enumerating open, closed, and filtered ports on target computers. Our ports 80, 443, 22 open. It can do service and version detection. This is huge. It tries to determine the actual application name and version running on those open ports. Like, oh, that's Apache HTTPD version 2.4.41 on port 80, or that's Open SSH 8.2 on port 22. Oh, and finally, operating system detection. Nmap attempts to remotely identify the OS and sometimes even hardware characteristics of network devices based on subtle differences in their network responses. The X-ray vision really comes from its ability to gather all this crucial intelligence about a system remotely without needing to log in. It essentially builds a detailed blueprint of your network's potential attack surface.
That's truly vital intelligence for any defender. Okay, let's look quickly at two common Nmap scan types mentioned in the material: the TCP-SYN scan and the TCP Connect scan. Expert, how do these differ fundamentally, and what are the strategic considerations an ethical hacker or a security professional makes when choosing one over the other? Why pick NASH-SS over NASH-ST?
Excellent question, because this choice really highlights a key trade-off in scanning: the balance between stealth and reliability or permissions. The TCP-SYN scan, which you invoke with the SSS flag in Nmap, is often called a half-open scan. It's the default scan type if you have root or administrator privileges. Nmap sends a TCP-SYN packet to a target port, just like starting a normal connection. If the port is closed, the target sends back an RST reset packet. Nmap knows the port is closed. If the port is open, the target replies with a synchronized acknowledged packet. Now here's the clever part. Nmap immediately sends an RST packet back, resetting the connection before the final ACK of the three-way handshake is sent. This requires privileged access, like root or administrator, to craft these raw packets. The strategic advantage: stealth. Because a full TCP connection is never established, this type of scan is less likely to be logged by many applications or simple logging systems on the target host. Okay, now in contrast, the TCP connect scan, invoked with N2ST, uses the operating system's standard connect system call. This attempts to initiate a normal, full TCP three-way handshake. For a closed port, the connect call fails quickly, often returning an error like connection refused, similar to receiving an RST in the SYN scan. But for an open port, the OS completes the entire SYN EPSINIC TCK handshake. A full connection is established. Then, Nmap immediately closes that connection, usually by sending an RST. The strategic consideration here: no special privileged access is needed. Any user can run this type of scan. It's often more reliable, especially through firewalls. But the trade-off is that because a full connection is established, it's much more likely to be logged by the target system's operating system or applications. It's less subtle, potentially noisier. So the choice boils down to your objective and permissions. Do you need stealth and have the necessary privileges? Use -SS. Do you lack privileges or need a potentially more reliable scan and aren't as concerned about logging? Use -ST.
That strategic choice between stealth and ease of use, or permissions, is definitely part of the deeper thinking required when conducting assessments. It's not just about running the tool, it's understanding the nuances and implications. Okay, now let's pivot to some of the most visible and disruptive types of attacks out there. Denial of service, or DOS, and its much bigger cousin, distributed denial of service, DDoS expert. How would you define a DOS attack for us in simple terms? And what's the ultimate goal from an attacker's perspective? Why do they do it?
Right. A DOS attack, denial of service, its primary goal is really quite straightforward: to deny legitimate users access to a particular resource. Simple as that. This resource could be a website, a specific server, an entire network connection, or even just a single application. This directly impacts network availability, which is a fundamental pillar of the CIA triad in network and system security, confidentiality, integrity, and availability. The ultimate goal for an attacker: it varies. It could be disruption for disruption's sake, maybe activism or hacktivism. It could be causing financial or reputational damage to a competitor, or sometimes it's used as a distraction, a smokescreen, while another more subtle attack like data theft is happening simultaneously.
We're talking about taking a service, a website, maybe even an entire network completely offline. It's like flooding a highway so absolutely no legitimate traffic can get through. What this really reveals, I think, is that DOS isn't just some technical glitch. It's a major computer-related risk that every single organization faces today. It threatens not just the technical infrastructure, but also business continuity, customer trust, and the bottom line. Understanding its categories seems vital for securing systems and, importantly, for incident response.
Exactly. And DOS attacks typically fall into three main categories, which helps in understanding the mechanisms. First, bandwidth attacks. These are kind of the oldest and still most common type. They simply aim to saturate the target's network connection with sheer volume of traffic. Overwhelming the bandwidth prevents legitimate requests from getting through. Think of it as a brute force approach, just trying to send more data than the target's pipe can handle. UDP floods or ICMP floods often fall here. Then there are attacks exploiting protocol exceptions. Here, attackers send network traffic in an unexpected or malformed way, exploiting vulnerabilities or weaknesses in how network protocols are designed or implemented. The classic example, which we see often, is a SYN flood attack against the TCP/IP three-way handshake. We touched on this with Nmap. The attacker sends a huge barrage of SYN packets to initiate connections, but never sends the final ACK. This leaves the server waiting with half-open connections, consuming its resources like memory and connection table entries, eventually preventing it from accepting new, legitimate connections. And finally, we have logic attacks. These are generally the most advanced, requiring a more sophisticated understanding of networking and specific system implementations. They exploit flaws in the logic of the target system rather than just overwhelming it. A historical example is the land attack, where a specially crafted packet had the same source IP address and port number as the destination IP address and port number. This confused the TCP/IP stack on vulnerable systems, causing them to loop indefinitely or crash as they tried to talk to themselves. What these categories illustrate is the evolution of attacks, from simply overwhelming bandwidth to cleverly exploiting the very rules of network communication.
Those historical examples, like the land attack, are fascinating. I remember reading about the ping of death, too. Could you briefly describe that one? And maybe the Smurf attack? And why is understanding these sort of older attacks still relevant today, even if many modern systems are more resilient? What's the lesson?
Sure. The ping of death attack, popular in the mid-90s, exploited the fact that an IP packet has a maximum theoretical size. But due to fragmentation, you could send fragments that, when reassembled by the target, created an oversized ICMP echo request, ping packet, say, larger than 65,535 bytes. Many older operating systems couldn't handle this oversized packet properly due to buffer overflows, causing them to crash or reboot. You could literally see the network utilization spike in Task Manager as the machine struggled. The Smurf attack was another clever one. It involved sending an ICMP echo request, ping packet, but the sourced IP address was spoofed to be the victim's IP address. And critically, this spoofed packet was sent to the broadcast address of a large, poorly configured network, the amplifying network. All the hosts on that amplifying network would then respond to the ping request, sending their ICMP echo replies back to the spoofed source IP address, the victim. This massively amplified the traffic directed at the victim, overwhelming their network connection. Now, why are they still relevant? While modern systems are largely patched against these specific old attacks, well, yeah, they handle large packets better, and routers usually block IP-directed broadcasts by default, the principles remain the same. Attackers still look for amplification vectors, like DNS or NTP amplification now instead of Smurf. They still look for resource exhaustion vulnerabilities, like SYN floods, and they still look for logic flaws. Understanding the history helps us recognize the patterns in new attacks.
That makes perfect sense. It's important to understand the tools and techniques exist. Not to use them maliciously, of course, but to comprehend the attacker's mindset and evolution. Knowledge of how tools like Nemesis for packet generation, or Land and La Tierra for IP spoofing, or even things like Blast or Panther for UDP floods work is crucial for implementing security measures and conducting assessments to ensure your own defenses are robust. Could you tell us a bit about a more commonly known DOS tool these days, like LOIC? How does it illustrate the accessibility of these attacks, even for less skilled individuals?
Certainly. A widely recognized tool, often seen in news reports about hacktivist groups, is the Low Orbit Ion Cannon, or LOIC. Interestingly, it was originally developed by Pratox Technology as a network stress testing application. But it's open source now, and because of its simplicity, it's frequently used with malicious intent for DOS and DDoS attacks. It works by allowing a user to easily flood a target server with a high volume of TCP packets, UDP packets, or HTTP requests. For UDP or TCP attacks, the user basically just enters the target IP or URL, selects the protocol, maybe adjusts some settings like port or number of threads, and clicks a button. It's very point and click. HTTP attacks involve sending a stream of HTTP GT or POST requests to the target web server, aiming to exhaust its resources, CPU, memory, database connections. A web application firewall, or WAF, might be better at detecting these HTTP floods compared to raw packet floods. The key insight here really is how potentially sophisticated attacks like DOS can be democratized through user-friendly tools like LOIC. This lowers the barrier to entry, making them a threat even from less technically skilled adversaries or loosely organized groups. And that leads us directly to the evolution. Distributed denial of service, DDoS attacks. The zombie PC phenomenon, which Akamai Technologies reported heavily on back in 2004, really brought DDoS into the mainstream consciousness. DDoS clarifies the difference from a single DOS source. It uses multiple compromised hosts, often hundreds, thousands, or even millions, commonly known as botnets or zombie PCs, all coordinated to launch DOS attacks simultaneously against the same target. That attack back then that blacked out Google, Yahoo, and other major websites, it involved a large network of these zombified home PCs, likely compromised via malware, all working in concert under the control of a botmaster.
Yeah, that's the millions of zombie computers scenario. Instead of one attacker trying to flood the highway, you suddenly have an army of attackers, each maybe only contributing a small stream, but together it's a massive flood. Expert, what's the profound shift in computer-related risks when an attack moves from a single source, DIS, to a distributed botnet, DDoS? And why is that so much harder to defend against effectively?
The profound shift is really one of scale and attribution. It fundamentally changes the defense game. With a single-source DOS attack, maybe you can identify the malicious IP address relatively easily and block it at your firewall or upstream. It's one source. With a DDoS attack, you're facing traffic coming from potentially thousands or even millions of different source IP addresses. These are often legitimate, albeit compromised machines spread all over the globe, home computers, servers, even IoT devices now. This makes it exponentially harder to. 1. Identify which traffic is malicious versus legitimate. 2. Filter or block the bad traffic without inadvertently blocking legitimate users, causing collateral damage. And 3. Trace the attack back to the actual perpetrators, because the attack is orchestrated remotely through layers of compromised systems. The computer-related risks escalate dramatically. It's not just about downtime anymore, but also about the immense resources required for incident response, the difficulty in mitigation, and the challenge of attribution. It's a much, much bigger problem. And DDoS attacks come in several common types, often just amplified versions of their DOS counterparts, leveraging the power of the botnet. We have UDP floods, where the botnet bombards the target with junk UDP packets, often aimed at random ports. This can saturate bandwidth and force the target to waste resources, sending back ICMP port unreachable messages. ICMP floods work just like the DOS version, like ping floods, but the sheer volume from the botnet makes it overwhelming. SYN floods, again, leverage the TCP three-way handshake vulnerability, but executed by hundreds or thousands of bots simultaneously, making resource exhaustion happen much faster. Beyond these direct floods, there are also amplification and reflection attacks. NTP amplification is a good example. Attackers send small queries with a spoofed source IP, the victims, to poorly secured network time protocol servers. These servers respond with much larger replies back to the victim, amplifying the attack traffic significantly. Similar attacks exist for DNS, SSDP, and other UDP-based protocols. And then HTTP floods, where the botnet bombards the target web server with seemingly legitimate HTTP, GET, or POST requests. These are harder to detect than packet floods because they look like real user traffic, but they aim to consume server resources like CPU, memory, or back-end database connections. Now, to evade detection and takedown efforts, botnet operators employ various clever tactics. One is fast flux. This isn't an attack itself, but rather an evasion technique used by botnet operators, particularly for hosting malicious websites or command and control servers. They rapidly change the DNS records, both A records for IPs and NS records for name servers, associated with a malicious domain, cycling through a large pool of compromised hosts, bots, very quickly, sometimes every few minutes. This makes it incredibly difficult for security researchers or law enforcement to pinpoint and shut down the core infrastructure. Another subtle but powerful technique sometimes used in conjunction is reflected cross-site scripting, XSS. While often used for stealing cookies or sessions, it can also be part of a larger picture. Here, a threat actor might abuse a vulnerability in a legitimate web application's HTTP response to execute malicious JavaScript in the browser of a visitor to that legitimate site. Essentially, they can craft a malicious URL that, when clicked by a victim, causes the vulnerable website to reflect a script back to the victim's browser, potentially turning that browser into an unwitting participant in a DDoS, like a browser-based bot, or using it as a launching point for other attacks. What these tactics really reveal is the attacker's constant innovation to maintain their operations and stay ahead of defenses.
Wow, it definitely sounds like an overwhelming problem. Given this constant innovation, this arms race expert, what's the overarching strategy for mitigating DOS and especially these complex DDoS attacks? It clearly can't be just one simple fix, right? There's no magic bullet.
You're absolutely right. There is no single magic bullet. Mitigating DOS and especially DDoS attacks requires a multi-layered, comprehensive, defense-in-depth strategy. It aligns perfectly with that continuous process approach we keep talking about in cybersecurity. For basic DOS protection, you need solid fundamentals. Using legitimate cloud-based hosting providers often gives you some level of built-in DDoS protection. Implement continuous availability monitoring so you know when you're under attack. Use registrar locking to prevent unauthorized changes to your domain registration. You absolutely need properly configured firewalls and intrusion detection prevention systems, IDS. Perform automatic static and dynamic code analysis, SAST-DOLISIS, on your applications, and use fuzz testing during development to find potential protocol or logic flaws before attackers do. Secure coding practices are vital. Pay attention to compiler warnings. Use things like stack canaries to prevent buffer overflows. On the network side, definitely limit or curb inbound ICMP messages if you don't need them. Fine-tune your perimeter firewall rules very carefully. Manage how your servers handle half-open TCP connections, and consider using SYN cookies to mitigate the impact of SYN floods. Now, for large-scale DDoS, you generally need more specialized solutions. Deep packet inspection, DPI capabilities, are often required to distinguish sophisticated attack traffic from legitimate traffic. Traffic scrubbing centers or cloud-based DDoS mitigation services are often essential for handling high-volume attacks. These services reroute your incoming traffic through their specialized infrastructure, filter out the malicious packets, and then forward only the legitimate traffic to your network. You have to expect attack waves, not just a single burst. Be prepared. Curbing ICMP response rates can help somewhat. Regularly profiling your normal traffic patterns is crucial so you can detect anomalies when they occur. Using IP reputation services to block known malicious sources helps. For web-based attacks, techniques like JavaScript challenges or kept TCHAs can filter out simple bots. Verifying IP sources, for example, using BCP38 unicast reverse path forwarding, helps prevent spoofing. Disabling unnecessary services, like maybe the monlist command in older NTP servers, which was used for amplification, is important. Implement robust access control lists, ACLs, on routers and firewalls. Comprehensive cyber awareness training for employees is always key. And, as we mentioned with LOIC, employing a well-configured web application firewall, WAF, is critical for protecting against application layer HTTP floods. The key takeaway here is that an effective DDoS defense isn't a single product you buy. It's a resilient ecosystem combining technology, firewalls, DeBrawlAF, scrubbing centers, well-defined processes, incident response plans, traffic profiling, and knowledgeable people, security teams, aware users. It's continuous.
That extensive list really underscores the continuous process of implementation, evaluation, and maintenance in cybersecurity. It's definitely not one silver bullet, but a layered defense, absolutely crucial for managing operations and monitoring and responding to incidents. Each of these measures addresses a different facet of the attack, building up that resilient shield. Okay, now let's talk about something just as fundamental, maybe even more so, to how the internet works. The internet's phone book, the domain name system, or DNS. Expert, why is DNS such a prime and frankly persistent target for attackers? What makes it so attractive?
DNS is such a prime target precisely because it is the internet's fundamental phone book. It handles that critical translation between the human-friendly domain names we type into our browsers, like google.com or tarleton.edu, and the numerical IP addresses that computers actually use to route traffic, like 172.217.160.142. Paul Macapetros' original design back in the early 80s was revolutionary, but it was created in a much more trusting internet environment. It didn't really foresee the scale of modern cybercrime or nation-state attacks. As a result, the core DNS protocol itself lacks strong built-in security mechanisms by default. The core insight is that trust in DNS is foundational to nearly all internet interactions. If you can manipulate DNS, you can control where users go online. That makes it an incredibly high-leverage target for attackers. Compromise DNS, and you can effectively compromise a user's ability to reach legitimate services securely or redirect them to malicious ones.
Right. So if someone messes with the phone book, you get redirected to the wrong number or maybe a malicious number disguised as the right one. This sounds like a subtle yet incredibly powerful attack vector. It poses significant computer-related risks and directly threatens information integrity because it can silently reroute users to malicious destinations, completely undermining trust without the user even realizing it initially. What's the practical impact of these DNS attacks for businesses and individuals? What happens when DNS goes wrong?
The impact of DNS attacks is really far-reaching and can be devastating. They can be used to divert traffic away from legitimate websites to malicious ones, often for phishing credentials or distributing malware. Think fake bank login pages. They can take entire websites or critical online services completely offline by making them unreachable if their DNS records are deleted or pointed to non-existent IPs. Sophisticated attackers can use DNS for data exfiltration, sneaking stolen data out of a compromised network by encoding it within DNS queries. And DNS can even be used to enable stealthy command and control C2 communication for malware, allowing compromised machines, bots, to contact their masters by looking up specific, changing domain names. If your customers can't reliably find your website because of a DNS attack, or worse, get redirected to a fake site that steals their login, the business impact, financial loss, reputation damage, loss of trust is immediate and severe. And there are several common DNS attack types we should be aware of. DNS hijacking, also sometimes called DNS poisoning or DNS redirection, involves an attacker manipulating the DNS query resolution process itself. They might compromise a DNS server or intercept queries to redirect users trying to reach a legitimate site, like mybank.com, to a compromised server they control. A 2021 study actually revealed that almost half, 47% of companies surveyed had experienced DNS hijacking. What's also interesting is that sometimes even legitimate entities like ISPs might perform a form of traffic redirection using DNS for data gathering, advertising, or sometimes even censorship, which raises other concerns. Then there's DNS spoofing, often referred to as DNS cache poisoning. This is where cybercriminals trick a DNS resolver, like your ISP's DNS server or even your local machine's cache, into storing an inaccurate IP address for a legitimate domain name. When a user then requests that domain, the poison resolver provides the fake IP address, sending the user to a malicious site designed for credential theft or malware delivery. This essentially creates a man-in-the-middle scenario mediated by the DNS system itself.
Wow, that's like the digital equivalent of someone secretly changing the street signs pointing to your bank and instead sending you to a fake bank building down the road set up by criminals. It's a critical attack on trust and definitely on information integrity. What's the most common real-world impact, or maybe the biggest defense challenge for these types of hijacking and spoofing attacks?
Yeah, for hijacking and spoofing, the most common real-world impact is definitely direct financial loss through credential theft, capturing banking logins, email passwords, etc., or through malware infections delivered by the fake sites. The defense challenge is significant because these attacks often target DNS infrastructure outside of the end users or even the target organization's immediate control. They might target ISP resolvers, root servers, or intermediate caches. This makes them harder for an individual organization to detect and mitigate directly without broader industry cooperation and the adoption of more secure protocols like DNS-SEC. It requires vigilance across the entire DNS ecosystem. Okay, moving on. There's also DNS tunneling. This is a particularly stealthy technique. Malicious actors encapsulate non-DNS data like malware, C2 communication, or stolen data within seemingly legitimate DNS queries and responses. Because DNS traffic, usually UDP port 53, is often allowed through firewalls with less scrutiny than other protocols, attackers can use this as a covert channel to bypass network filters and exfiltrate data or maintain control over compromised systems. Interestingly, DNS tunneling isn't always malicious. Some legitimate VPN services might use it as a way to bypass restrictive firewalls or censorship in certain environments, but it's commonly abused. Then we have DNS rebinding. This is a clever attack that tricks a victim's web browser into connecting to a malicious website by exploiting how browsers cache DNS resolutions and enforce the same origin policy. Essentially, an attacker gets a user to visit a site they control. That site's DNS resolves quickly to the attacker's IP, but with a very short time to live, TTL. When the TTL expires, the attacker changes the DNS record to point to an internal IP address on the victim's local network, like a vulnerable router or IoT device. The browser, thinking it's still talking to the original domain, might then allow scripts from the attacker's page to interact with the internal device, potentially taking control of it or extracting data. It can even be used to target social media accounts if vulnerabilities exist. And finally, there's DNS typo squatting. This is more of a social engineering attack that leverages common user errors. Attackers register domain names that are slight misspellings or variations of popular legitimate domains, e.g. PayPal.com instead of PayPal.com, or Goggle.com instead of Google.com. They set up fake websites at these typo domains, often mimicking the real site, hoping users will accidentally type the wrong address and land on their malicious page, where they might be tricked into entering login credentials or downloading malware. This preys directly on human error and inattention.
These are incredibly clever, sometimes devious attacks. They really highlight how attackers exploit not just technical vulnerabilities in protocols like DNS, but also human psychology and browser behaviors. So for a student learning to implement concise security measures, what's the underlying philosophy or maybe set of core best practices that guides the mitigation of these diverse DNS threats? How do we start protecting this phone book?
The underlying philosophy is really one of hardening the entire DNS infrastructure and verifying trust at every possible point in the resolution chain. It's about reducing the attack surface and adding layers of validation. To mitigate these various DNS attacks, several critical steps are necessary. First, from an operational standpoint, shut down unnecessary or open DNS resolvers on your network. Place legitimate internal resolvers behind a firewall and ensure external users cannot query your internal DNS resources directly. It's often a good idea to separate your authoritative name servers, which hold your domain's official records, from your recursive resolvers, which look up external domains for your users. This prevents a compromise of one from immediately affecting the other. Applying security patches promptly to your DNS server software is absolutely critical, as many vulnerabilities are discovered and fixed over time. At the domain registration level, implement client lock or registrar lock with your domain registrar. This prevents unauthorized changes to your domain's registration details, like changing the name servers. Crucially, ensure your DNS registrar and your hosting provider support DNS-SE, DNS security extensions, and then enable and properly configure DNS-SEC for your domains. DNS-SCC adds cryptographic signatures to DNS data, allowing resolvers to verify that the information they receive is authentic and hasn't been tampered with, addressing spoofing poisoning. This is probably the single most important technical control. For end users, using encrypted VPNs can add a layer of security, often routing DNS queries to the secure tunnel, and internally, enforcing strong router password hygiene on home or small business routers, which often act as local DNS forwarders, prevents them from being easily compromised and used in attacks. These mitigation steps are direct applications of the skills you need, involving encryption with DNS-SCC and VPNs, governance, registrar locks, patching policies, and managing operations effectively in the field.
Right, protecting DNS is definitely a multifaceted challenge. It requires that blend of encryption, governance, and operational best practices. These mitigation steps sound like direct application of the skills you need to implement, configure security measures, and manage operations effectively in the field. It's a comprehensive approach to securing the very foundation of how we navigate the internet. Okay, now let's shift gears slightly and talk about a daily battlefield that, frankly, many of us probably take for granted: our email inboxes. Expert, could you give us just a quick refresher on how email basically works, highlighting any aspects that inherently make it such a common target for attackers?
Absolutely. At its very core, email involves a few key components. Email clients, like Outlook, Apple Mail, Gmail web interface, mail servers, which handle sending, receiving, and storing emails, and specific protocols that govern communication between them. SMTP, or Simple Mail Transfer Protocol, is the standard protocol used for sending email from a client to a server, and also between mail servers. For receiving email, we typically use POP3, Post Office Protocol version 3, or IMAP, Internet Message Access Protocol. POP3 generally downloads mail to your local device and removes it from the server, while IMAP keeps the mail on the server, allowing you to access it from multiple devices and keeping things synchronized. Emails themselves are essentially structured text messages, though attachments add complexity and potential risk. Now, the key thing to remember relevant to security is that the original SMTP protocol, designed decades ago, had virtually no built-in security features. No strong authentication, no encryption, no integrity checks. This inherent lack of security in the foundation is what makes it such an attractive target. That's why the importance of adding layers like encryption, using TLS for SMTP, POP, IMP, often called SMTPS, POP3S, IMAPS, and authentication mechanisms like SPF, DKIM, DMARC, which we'll discuss, is absolutely paramount today for ensuring the confidentiality and integrity of email communications.
Right, it's a system designed way back in 1971, as the source mentions, before cybercrime was even really a recognized term. Expert, what's the inherent vulnerability that stems directly from that foundational simplicity, that lack of built-in security? And why does it make email such a consistent, persistent target, even with all the modern advancements and filters we have now?
That's really the core paradox of email, isn't it? Its foundational simplicity, which made it so revolutionary and ubiquitous, is also its greatest weakness from a security perspective. The original protocols were designed for open communication between known, trusted parties in academic and research environments. They weren't designed for the hostile, anonymous, global environment of today's internet. There's no inherent, universally enforced authentication of the sender's identity in basic SMTP. There's no automatic guarantee that the message hasn't been altered in transit, integrity. And there's no encryption by default, meaning messages historically traveled in plain text. This makes it incredibly easy for attackers to spoof the from address, making an email look like it came from someone else, your boss, your bank, a trusted brand. It makes it easy to inject malicious content like links or attachments. And it makes it easy to trick users through social engineering because the medium itself doesn't provide strong signals of trustworthiness. The stark reality, backed up by countless reports, is that email-based attacks remain the most popular and often most effective tool for cybercriminals. Why? Because they exploit this foundational lack of trust, and they target the human element, our curiosity, our sense of urgency, our trust in familiar names or brands. Statistics consistently show that a huge percentage, often more than 1/3 of all data breaches, involve an email phishing attack as the initial vector. And surveys indicate that the vast majority, over 83% of organizations, face email threats consistently day in and day out. This puts immense pressure on security leaders and teams because email's fundamental infrastructure wasn't really designed with today's security threats in mind. We're constantly layering defenses on top of that original, inherently insecure foundation.
Yeah, it's sobering. Email isn't just a communication tool anymore. It's often the primary entry point, the first step in a much broader compromise. From malicious coding and scripting, cleverly delivered as seemingly harmless attachments, to incredibly sophisticated social engineering campaigns, your inbox is truly a daily battleground, filled with computer-related risks. So, expert, Out of the huge multitude of email threats described in the source material, which one do you personally see evolving most rapidly right now? Or maybe which one is the absolute hardest for organizations to defend against effectively, especially in terms of maintaining messaging integrity?
That's a really challenging question because the threat landscape evolves so quickly and different threats pose different challenges. But if I had to pick the ones that are currently among the most insidious, costly, and hardest to defend against with purely technical means, I'd point to business email compromise, BEC, and sophisticated account takeovers. Let me quickly run through some of the key threats listed, and then we can focus on why BEC and ATO are particularly tough nuts to crack. Spam. Still around, obviously. Unsolicited junk mail. Least complex, but still costly in terms of lost productivity. The source mentions maybe $20 billion a year globally. Filters are pretty good now, but volume is still an issue. Malware attachments. Classic threat. Malware like ransomware or info stealers embedded in documents, Word, PDF, Excel, or executables, relying on users clicking or enabling macros. Defenses include signature matching, heuristics, and sandboxing attachments. Data exfiltration. Using email, either maliciously by an insider or accidentally by an untrained employee, to send sensitive data outside the organization. Can lead to massive breach, costs the source notes an average of $8 million for U.S. companies. Requires secure email gateways, SEGs, with data loss prevention, DLP policies, email scams and malicious URLs, phishing, broad category, using fraud and social engineering to steal information directly, or tricking users into clicking malicious links that lead to credential harvesting pages, fake logins, or malware downloads. Gateways with point-of-click URL protection and URL rewriting analysis are crucial defenses here. Spear phishing, targeted phishing, highly personalized emails, often appearing to come from a trusted colleague, manager, or known contact. They have a much higher success rate than generic phishing because they leverage research and context, often the precursor to BC or ATO. Spoofing, domain and brand impersonation. Attackers registering domains that look very similar to legitimate ones, like using a dotless I or substituting letters, e.g. titanhq.com instead of titanhq.com, or simply impersonating well-known brands, Microsoft is a huge target, in the display name or content to trick users. Requires advanced email security features and user awareness. Extortion scams. Emails claiming to have compromising information about the victim, often fabricated, like claiming to have recorded them via webcam, and demanding payment, usually cryptocurrency, to prevent its release. Filters can often quarantine these based on keywords and patterns. Configuration errors. This is an internal threat. Improperly configured email security solutions themselves, like SPF, DKIM, DVARC records, can create visibility gaps, allow spoofed emails through, or negatively impact incident response capabilities. Business email compromise, PEC. Okay, here's one of the really tough ones. Attackers gain access to a genuine business email account, often through scare phishing or credential stuffing, or create a highly convincing spoof. They then impersonate an executive or vendor to trick employees, usually in finance or HR, into making fraudulent wire transfers, changing payroll deposits, or sending sensitive data. These bypass many technical filters because they often originate from a legitimate trusted account and contain no malicious links or attachments. Huge financial losses, the FBI reported, $1.7 billion in losses just in 2019. Require sophisticated behavioral analysis and strict internal processes. Conversation hijacking and lateral phishing. Related to Bacado, once an attacker compromises an account, they might monitor ongoing email conversations and then inject themselves into the thread, continuing the discussion but subtly altering instructions or adding malicious links attachments. Or they might use the compromised account to send highly convincing phishing emails laterally to other trusted recipients within the same organization or to partner organizations. Very effective. Account takeover, ATO. The attacker successfully gains access to a user's actual email account credentials via phishing, malware, password reuse, etc., and logs in. From there, they can conduct all sorts of unauthorized activities, send BEC emails, perform lateral phishing, steal data, reset passwords for other linked accounts. High-value accounts like Microsoft 365 are prime targets. Require sophisticated behavioral modeling to detect anomalous login or sending patterns. Malicious insiders. Perhaps the most complex threat. Disgruntled employees, corporate spies, or departing employees who abuse their legitimate access to steal data, sabotage systems, or commit fraud using email. Extremely hard to detect technically because their access is authorized. Requires strong access controls, DLP, and potentially behavioral modeling, user and entity behavior analytics, UA. So, to circle back to your question, BEC and ATO are so challenging because they often leverage authenticated, legitimate email accounts or incredibly sophisticated social engineering that bypasses traditional technical controls focused on known bad signatures, links, or attachments. They exploit inherent human trust within the organization or between business partners. Detecting them often requires moving beyond simple content filtering to analyzing context, behavior, intent, and relationships, which is much harder. Plus, strong procedural controls and continuous user education are absolutely vital.
That distinction really highlights the ongoing battle, doesn't it? It's a constant arms race, moving from blocking obviously bad stuff to detecting subtle manipulations of trust and behavior. So how do we even begin to defend against this relentless barrage of email threats? What's the recommended layered strategy for maintaining messaging integrity that combines both those fundamental technical protocols and more advanced tools and techniques?
You're right. A layered defense strategy is absolutely essential for achieving any reasonable level of messaging integrity. You can't rely on just one thing. First, we have those crucial foundational email authentication protocols. These are designed to combat spoofing and verify sender authenticity. Sender Policy Framework, SPF. This allows domain owners to publish a list of IP addresses that are authorized to send email on behalf of their domain. Receiving mail servers can check the SPF record in DNS to see if the connecting IP address is on that authorized list. It helps prevent basic sender address spoofing. Domain keys identified mail, DKIM. This uses public key cryptography to add a digital signature to outgoing emails. The domain owner publishes their public key in DNS. Receiving servers can use this public key to verify the signature attached to the email, ensuring that the message hasn't been tampered with in transit and that it genuinely originated from a server authorized by the domain owner. It provides message integrity, domain-based message authentication, reporting, and conformance, DRRC. This protocol essentially builds on SPF and DKIM. It allows domain owners to tell receiving servers what to do with emails that fail either SPF or DKIM checks or both. The policy can be set to none, just monitor, quarantine, send to spam, or reject block delivery entirely. DMRC also provides valuable reporting back to the domain owner about who is sending email purporting to be from their domain, helping them identify abuse or misconfigurations.
Okay, so these three, SPF, DKIM, DRC, they really work together like a sophisticated passport control system for your email, don't they? Checking the sender's credentials, SPF, verifying the integrity of the package, DKIM, and providing instructions for handling failures, DIRC. What's the strategic interplay of these protocols? How does mastering their configuration and interpretation become a key skill for someone tasked with implementing security measures for email?
That's a great analogy. The strategic interplay is exactly that. SPF primarily verifies the sender's path or infrastructure. DKIM verifies the message content integrity and authenticates the sending domain cryptographically. DKIM then ties them together, requiring alignment between the domains checked by SPF DKIM and the from address the user sees, and provides the crucial policy enforcement and reporting layer. Mastering them as a security professional means you can proactively protect your organization's brand reputation from being damaged by spoofing attempts. You can significantly improve the deliverability of your legitimate emails because receivers trust them more. And you gain vital visibility through DMARC reports into potential abuse or configuration issues you might not otherwise see. It's a crucial skill for implementing security measures because it allows you to establish and enforce digital trust for your domain's email communications at a fundamental protocol level. Implementing DMARCs correctly, especially moving towards quarantine or reject policies, is a major step in securing your email ecosystem. Now, beyond these foundational protocols, organizations typically deploy a secure email gateway, SE. Think of this as a spiralized email firewall, and a siege sits in front of the organization's mail server, or integrates with cloud email like Microsoft 365 or Google Workspace, and provides advanced protection features. These often include more sophisticated anti-spam and antivirus engines, content filtering based on keywords or policies, attachment sandboxing, detonating attachments in a safe environment to check for malicious behavior, data loss prevention, DLP capabilities, and often advanced threat protection against phishing URLs and BAC attempts using AI and machine learning. It acts as that critical first line of defense, aiming to intercept threats before they even reach your users' inboxes.
That makes sense. The SEC is like the dedicated security checkpoint before email even gets into the main building. But what about the human element? You mentioned it's so critical, especially for sophisticated attacks like BEC that might bypass even a good SEC. How does that tie into maintaining integrity across the organization? It almost feels like it connects back to the concept of physical security, but for the digital realm, right? Securing the people.
That's a perfect connection to make. It absolutely connects back to physical security principles in a profound way, because ultimately the weakest link in many security chains is often the human user. While all these technical defenses, SPF, DKIM, DMARC, SEGs, endpoint protection, are crucial and necessary, even the best stack of technical solutions can potentially be bypassed by sufficiently clever social engineering targeting an unaware or careless user. Therefore, continuous user awareness training and education are paramount. Teaching users how to recognize the signs of phishing emails, how to scrutinize sender addresses and links, why they should be wary of urgent requests for sensitive information or money transfers, and, critically, how and why they should report suspicious emails to the security team. This is absolutely vital. Educating users isn't just a nice to have, it's a crucial best practice for maintaining integrity across the organization. You can build the strongest digital fortress walls, but if an employee is tricked into willingly opening the main gate and letting the attacker inside, those technical walls become far less effective. Human vigilance, cultivated through ongoing training and reinforcement, acts as the ultimate adaptable, continuous firewall.
That's a powerful point, the human firewall. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground layer 2, monitoring, DDoS, DNS, email security. What does all this complex technical knowledge mean for you, the listener, the learner, especially if you're located here in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex? The job market here, as the analysis shows, is incredibly robust. There's a strong, persistent demand for skilled IT professionals, especially in areas like cybersecurity, network infrastructure, cloud, and data management. DFW is a real powerhouse for technology and information services. It's home to major corporate headquarters and regional hubs for giants like AT&T, Wells Fargo, Lockheed Martin, American Airlines, Charles Schwab, Toyota, McKesson, and countless others, all of whom are constantly seeking tech talent, including security professionals. It's genuinely a fantastic place to build an IT career.
It is, but what's fascinating and sometimes frustrating for new entrants is the paradox we see in the market, not just in DFW, but globally. There are literally millions of unfilled IT and cybersecurity positions worldwide, a significant skills gap. Yet at the same time, entry-level candidates often face what feels like an insurmountable experience barrier. We see job postings for even help desk or tier 1 support roles now frequently asking for bachelor's degrees and sometimes several years of specific experience. It can be a really challenging landscape for new graduates to navigate. It's a common frustration, definitely, but one that can be strategically overcome with the right kind of preparation and positioning.
Absolutely. And that's precisely where your program here at the Dr. Sampak College of Business at Tarleton State is uniquely positioned to help you bridge that very gap. Expert, how does the academic curriculum here, with its intentional blend of business acumen and deep technical proficiency, specifically align with what DFW employers are actually looking for? How does it help students overcome that daunting experience barrier? What's the secret sauce, maybe?
Well, I think the secret sauce, if you will, is that intentional blend you mentioned. It's about combining rigorous academic theory, understanding the why behind security principles, with practical, hands-on application learning the how. Your academic curriculum here is designed to align with employer needs because you're not just learning what cybersecurity concepts are in isolation, you're learning how to apply them within a business context, understanding risk, governance, and impact. The strong focus on hands-on learning is key. Things like preparing for industry certifications like CompTIA Security Plus, which this course directly supports, and crucially, using live virtual machine labs to actually configure firewalls, run Nmap scans, analyze packets, set up port security.
Yeah.
These are powerful pathways to overcoming that experience barrier. These aren't just abstract academic exercises. They provide direct, tangible, practical experience that employers recognize and value. When you can go into an interview and talk confidently about how you actually configured DHCP snooping in a lab environment, or analyze the results of a SYN scan you ran with Nmap, you're demonstrating concrete skills that immediately differentiate you from someone who only has theoretical knowledge. And if we connect this back to the bigger picture, the learning outcomes of BCIS 4345, through deep dives like this one, you're gaining the critical knowledge foundation. You're learning to understand the risks involved, like those layer 2 vulnerabilities or the impact of DOS attacks we discussed. You're learning how to strategize for securing systems effectively and ensuring data integrity. You're learning about physical security concepts and how they relate, even in virtual environments. You're learning how to perform risk analysis, comprehend different encryption methods and their applications, and grasp the vital continuous processes of security implementation, evaluation, and keeping an eye on future trends. These are comprehensive knowledge outcomes that directly address the strategic understanding that industries and employers are desperately looking for. It gives you that bigger picture mindset.
Exactly. And beyond the knowledge, you're actively developing concrete skills, the ability to actually do things. Skills like the ability to implement and configure security measures things we talked about today, like port security on a switch, or DHCP snooping, or setting up email authentication. The skill to conduct assessments using industry-standard tools like Nmap to map out a network or identify open ports. The skill to manage operations in a security context, perhaps through security monitoring using tools like SPAN or interpreting logs from a SIEM. And critically, the ability to monitor and respond to incidents, recognizing the signs of a phishing campaign, understanding the steps to take during a DDoS attack, knowing how to contain a threat. These aren't just abstract bullet points. These are the specific actionable skills explicitly sought by DFW employers in their job descriptions. Look at roles like a principal cybersecurity network engineer at AT&T or a Splunk engineer at Wells Fargo. The requirements directly map to these skills. Your coursework isn't just theory, it's active skill building that directly translates to real-world job roles.
And what's truly fascinating when you look at the DFW job market analysis alongside the topics from today's chapter is how the specific tools and concepts we've discussed directly translate into highly marketable skills. Job postings in DFW consistently and explicitly mention proficiency requirements for firewalls, intrusion prevention systems, IPS, Linux operating systems, essential for many security tools, packet analysis tools like Wireshark, and scripting languages like Python, PowerShell, or Bash, often used for both legitimate automation and analyzing or creating malicious scripts. Furthermore, knowledge of security information and event management, or SIEM platforms, is huge. Splunk and the ELK stack, Elasticsearch, Logstash, Kibana, are frequently mentioned. Understanding email authentication protocols like SBF, DKIM, and DMR is becoming crucial. Familiarity with vulnerability scanning and application security testing tools like Veracode or AppScan is also in demand. Mastering these tools and concepts directly prepares you for roles like network administrator, cyber systems security engineer, cyber analyst, security operations center, SOC analyst, senior information security analyst, and vulnerability management analyst. The connection is very direct.
That's a really powerful list and a clear connection. Expert, if you had to pick one foundational tool or concept from today's discussion that every student should prioritize mastering first, really getting comfortable with, given its widespread use and immediate impact on employability in these kinds of roles, what would it be?
Oh, that's a great question, and it's always tough to pick just one. But if I were advising a student starting out, based on today's topics and market relevance, I'd probably lean towards deeply understanding the fundamentals of network protocols, TCP/IP, Ethernet, DNS, DHCP, and becoming truly proficient with Nmap. Why? Because Nmap gives you that initial reconnaissance capability, the X-ray vision we talked about. It's foundational to almost any cybersecurity role, whether you're defending a network, performing penetration testing, conducting an audit, or responding to an incident. You need to understand what's on the network first, coupled with a solid, deep understanding of how TCP/IP actually works underneath, how packets flow, how DNS resolves. That combination is incredibly powerful and forms the bedrock for so many other security skills. Start there, build a strong foundation. And finally, let's talk compensation, because that's important too. Looking at the DFW market, while entry-level salaries definitely vary, for instance, a cybersecurity analyst role might range from, say, the mid-$40 range up to $90 plus, depending on the company's specific skills and any prior internships or experience. And a network administrator might start around $78K, plus the key is that demonstrated skills and relevant certifications like the CompTIA Security. Plus, this course prepares you for significantly positioned graduates for the higher end of those entry-level ranges. And the growth potential is substantial. More senior specialized roles command significantly higher compensation. For example, that principal cybersecurity network engineer role at AT&T mentioned in the analysis showed a range of $141K to $211K. A Splunk solutions engineer role could range from $202K to $270K. This clearly shows the immense career growth potential right here in DFW, directly linked to your commitment to acquiring, demonstrating, and continuously updating these practical, in-demand skills.
Absolutely. This isn't just about getting that first job. It's about launching a successful, rewarding, and potentially high-earning career. Your investment of time and effort now in truly understanding these approaches, techniques, and best practices from your coursework and deep dives like this is directly tied to your future earning potential and your long-term professional growth right here in the DFW Metroplex. It's really about building a future where your skills are in high demand and highly valued.
So wrapping up today, we've taken quite a deep dive into some critical infrastructure threats and essential security monitoring techniques. We've explored those subtle but dangerous threats lurking down at Layer 2, dissecting the mechanics of attacks like DHCP spoofing and MAC flooding. We uncovered how invaluable tools like Nmat provide crucial reconnaissance capabilities for both attackers and defenders. We then shifted our focus up the stack to the high-stakes world of denial of service, distributed denial of service, and DNS attacks, looking at their mechanisms and mitigation strategies. And finally, we fortified our understanding of email security, covering everything from those fundamental authentication protocols like SPF, DKIM, and DMARC, to the sophisticated social engineering threats like BEC that target your inbox every day.
Yeah, we started out by asking that question. How could a single, seemingly innocuous network packet cause so much chaos? Now, hopefully, you have a much clearer understanding of the intricate, constant dance of attacks and defenses that plays out across our networks every single second. You're not just learning about theoretical risks anymore. You're gaining the practical knowledge and the foundational skills to identify, mitigate, and proactively secure the digital world around you. You're learning how to turn those potentially chaotic packets into manageable challenges.
Exactly. And thank you sincerely for joining us on this deep dive today. Your commitment to learning, to digging into this material, and to your own growth is precisely what the cybersecurity industry needs more of. If you found this discussion valuable for your BCIS 4345 studies or for planning your future career, please do take a moment to like, subscribe, and maybe share this deep dive with others who might benefit. And please don't forget to check the description below for all the additional resources, links, and guides we've curated for you related to today's topic.
And as you reflect on today's material, maybe mull this over. In a constantly evolving threat landscape with new technologies emerging all the time, what single fundamental principle of network security do you believe will remain the most critical, the most enduring for securing data systems, no matter what new attacks or technologies emerge in the future? Think about that. Keep learning, keep exploring, and remember, stay connected, stay secure. Until next time, keep your network strong, your data protected, and your curiosity alive.